What are some declassified government documents that are surprisingly terrifying? This isn't really a classified document, but at one point the US government was telling people to build your own bomb shelter to protect your family. And it showed how to dig a 8-foot by 4-foot by 10-foot hole in your backyard, and if there is a nuclear threat, to get your family and go in there and cover it with a door. So obviously that wouldn't really protect anyone in the case of a nuclear attack. Later it came out that the purpose of telling families to do that was so if there was a nuclear attack on American soil, they wouldn't have to bury as many bodies because the families dug their own grave. So yeah, not classified, but along the same disturbing stuff the US government did. When the Space Shuttle Challenger was destroyed, it was reported that all 7 astronauts were killed instantly. It was revealed decades later that some, if not all of the astronauts survived the initial explosion, as the cockpit cabin had enough protection to not be breached. For 2 minutes and 45 seconds. They were awake and aware. As they plummeted toward the Atlantic Ocean. Understandably, NASA knew that the news of their terrifying death would have crippled the space program even more than it already was. Read the book, 1 Second After. It's about what happens after an EMP attack on the US. It's based on actual government studies and estimates. It is terrifying. Boeing X-37B unmanned space shuttle. It just spent 720 days in space doing God knows what. In East Germany, a committed freedom fighter and her husband had dealt with having her home raided while she was away, being arrested on the way to protests, and all sorts of state-sponsored harassment. After the wall fell, she was able to read the documents the Stasi had kept on her and found out her own husband was an undercover agent and had written many reports on her activities with a bloodless banality. Operation Northwoods. A plan for a false flag operation that came from the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Department of Defense in 1962 and given to JFK, who turned it down. The plan called for the CIA to commit terrorist actions against U.S. civilians across the United States and frame Cuba, allowing us the right to invade and depose Castro and the communist government there. It was declassified and can be found online at the JFK Library. Terrifying that no one knows or seems to care that this was suggested by our government to the president. Project Sunshine, where the U.S. government bought remains of dead infants to test for radiation when they took limbs from them. The parents were never told. One mother wasn't allowed to dress her daughter for her funeral because doctors had removed her legs and didn't want her to find out. When they performed a lobotomy on Rosemary Kennedy due to her being intellectually disabled. At 23 years of age, her father arranged a prefrontal lobotomy. At the time, the procedure had only been done about 100 times in U.S. It failed, leaving her unable to speak intelligibly and incapacitated. She was conscious during the operation. They say that the neurosurgeons, or whatever they're called, ask the patient to count from 10 to know when they should stop cutting down. I've heard that they stopped when her speech was incoherent. Saddest thing is that she had to endure it for 64 years, all that because her family couldn't risk any political embarrassment. I noticed this is more disturbing than terrifying, but I think it fits. I remember something about a heart attack gun I read some time ago. Basically a poison gun that once shot is untraceable in the victim's body and leaves no mark on their body. SRY if it sounds RLY vague. I don't think it's classified, but Project Thor. Using a satellite bomber to bomb a city. Imagine a missile or a bomb coming from space. And before you know it, your city is destroyed by a falling missile bomb. Can't remember the source. But apparently there is a legit order signed by Hilter to his nuclear researchers saying if they have a viable nuclear explosive, start loading into V2s immediately. Not declassified but leaked. Operation Yellowhammer. The government tried to say it was old, but it had an August date on it. Jeffrey Dahmer's full confession. A couple of 100 pages of pure madness. Necrophilia. Dismemberment. Skinning. Lobotomy. Body part preservation. Cannibalism. Dahmer became pretty close to his interrogating detectives Dennis Murphy and Patrick Kennedy, and provided a lot of detail to them. A lot of it in a pretty candid, offhand manner. One U.S. bomber accidentally dropped a nuclear bomb a short distance from a major U.S. city, can't remember which. But luckily it didn't detonate. MK Ultra. Partially illegal. Forced mind control experiments utilizing psychoactive drugs. Conducted by the CIA in 1950s, 60s. Surprised no one has mentioned the Panama Papers. They've been out for a while. But there's been little coverage of them. TLDR of them. Lots of money laundering that was tracked pointed to major governments and global businesses. Edit. Amazon Prime has a series called The Giant Beast that is the global economy. They talk about the Panama Papers in a couple episodes. Not really terrifying but up. Operation Paperclip. Where after WW2 the US government took scientists and shipped them to America to do science. Some of them came straight from Nuremberg cells. The most noteworthy being Wernher von Braun. Von Braun built the V-2 rockets with Jewish slave labor. Every day they would execute the 5 slowest workers in front of the other workers to incentive them to work harder. Once he came to America. We shipped him to Huntsville, Alabama, where he built the Saturn V, the rocket used in the Apollo program, and got us to the moon. Not really declassified. But leaked. Room 641A. It was a room in an AT&T exchange with a whole bunch of monitoring equipment for the US government. Completely legal under the Patriot Act. Their reasoning for Vietnam. Such a devastating waste of lives on both sides. See the Vietnam War documentary by Ken Burns. Operation Unthinkable while never fully developed. It was a hypothetical UK war plan that would have started WWII before World War II was even over. It called for Allied troops to attack the Soviet Red Army at Berlin and push them out of Europe entirely. Not having the manpower to fight them alone. The plan not only relied heavily on American forces, but also called for the re-armament of German soldiers who would then fight alongside the Allies. The plan didn't get much traction because public support by that point would be been close to zero. And the Americans weren't interested since they still had Japan to deal with and a war against the Soviets would likely lead to a Soviet-Japanese alliance. Among other obvious issues with the plan. Not really terrifying, I suppose. But it would have fundamentally reshaped the world that we live in today had it gone ahead. I don't remember the exact name, but there was a US government project to create individual profiles of all people detailing all aspects of their lives. But it was scrapped in 2006. The year Facebook opened to the public. It's not a declassified document, but a friend of mine that served in Desert Storm told me some things. Every morning during muster their group was given a small pill to take supposedly to protect them from the toxins the Iranians were releasing into the air. My friend thought it was odd and he never swallowed his pill. Just as some other members of their group didn't. Years go by and all of the people that he still talks to that took the pill have cancer of various types as well as a plethora of other medical issues. The ones that did not take the pill seemingly have nothing wrong with them other than normal effects of being middle-aged. Some crazy stuff. And often the military enlisted become guinea pigs for the government without their knowledge or consent. The MK-Ultra mind control experiments. The CIA basically tested various means of mind, suggestibility control through many front organizations. The main intent was to improve interrogation methods but later expanded into other avenues of research such as making sleeper agents. Tests were performed both with and without knowledge or permission on large numbers or American and Canadian citizens. While some files have been declassified or leaked, the bulk of the files have either been destroyed or remain classified. As a result, larger statistics on the project such as death tolls, numbers of subjects and personnel involved in research gain can only be estimated as of today. Operation Acoustic Kitty was pretty terrifying. Not terrifying because of its purpose but because have you ever tried to make a cat go where you want it to? That they actually did follow John Lennon around and Nixon had a very strange obsession. The documents are quite surreal to read. FISA courts almost never deny requests for warrants for surveillance. And the existence of those warrants is classified. In 2005 they had 2,000 requests. Denied 0. You cannot represent yourself or appeal since its existence is classified. A 2003 congressional hearing revealed that agents who made FISA applications didn't understand the concepts or probable cause an agent of a foreign power. Both requirements for FISA to apply. Even when the results of that surveillance result in charges. The government has successfully maintained that they do not need to say what the surveillance application said. In 2000 the FISC found that FBI agents has lied in at least 75 applications. Those applications were not invalidated. Of course. Bush later decided to just have the NSA do surveillance without a warrant. And when the Supreme Court found him, and others, guilty of violating multiple amendments and laws, Obama signed a law pardoning them.